Noshir, thank you so much for joining. And it's important that you've launched this report, Shaping India's SaaS Landscape, at this point of time in India, because we've just come out of the second wave, and we're all looking at the Indian economy and what it holds for all of us. And I think there's some very interesting findings in this report. I would request both of you to tell us what are some of the key things, and what does it mean for India, for the country.
All right. So I think, Shradha, what I'll do is I'll give you a little background of, how did this all came about.
Yeah.
If you know, during pandemic, and we had a session where SaaS companies were gasping for breath, so does all the businesses. We didn't know how many will survive, will there be growth or not. So I'm glad to say that, SaaS has done pretty well, and, entrepreneurs have been very resilient through this process. And in fact, the growth rate has been more than pre-pandemic era in the SaaS company. So that actually brought us to the question at SaaSBOOmi when we were discussing in the governing council that, what is that is leading to the resilience and how big that can become? Because we have seen some crazy growth in some segments of SaaS, right? Because of 10x growth in the digitization overall. And then we reach out to Noshir, because Noshir had done that work with NASSCOM, which you would know. That was a seminal work in sense, which put the number out there for services, that how big the services can grow. Because that is one kind of compass which then allowed us to make initiatives, investments, garner government support, international support. So that was the idea of bringing it all together. And I'm glad we are here today, and we're happy to walk you through the findings of the reports. So Noshir, you want to get started with first few points, and then I'll add?
Sure. So maybe I'll go through the first 3 points, and then Manav, you can add. Shradha, as Manav said, it was actually a little bit of a deja vu for me as well, right? It took me back like 22, 23 years earlier when we had done this with NASSCOM. And I honestly was amazed when we actually went into the analytics and looked at the data and so on, just the size of the opportunity ahead of us, right? So let me just give you a few of the headline sort of findings. So the first finding was, actually, even if you compare to a very attractive IT services sector that has grown up around all of us in the last 20 odd years, software, and particularly SaaS, is actually even more attractive when we look at that as a segment, right? So just to give you one statistic, when you look at all enterprise spending on technology, software is about only 20% of that total enterprise that is spending that an enterprise does. But it's nearly 50% of the value creation, right? So that just gives you the headline of where the market believes the future for SaaS and software is. The second is, when we actually went into the numbers, we think that the Indian SaaS ecosystem can be worth $1 trillion in 2030. $1 trillion in 2030 will be one of the biggest value creation opportunities that India is going to see in the decade ahead of us. More importantly, it'll create 500,000 great jobs for people in India, right? And not to mention the Forex and the multiplier in job creation and the construction, the activity that this enables, and so on and so forth, right? So even keeping aside all the multipliers, $1 trillion in value is an enormous opportunity in front of us. And why do we think that's key? And then Manav should talk about what we need to get there. Remember, this is opportunity, right? It's ambition. The third point I was referring to is the reason why, Shradha, it's now, right, is 2 or 3 things. One is the pandemic really has changed the focus on digital, as Manav was saying earlier, and it's forcing a lot of companies, small and large, to go towards digital. Second is we're doing digital sales, right? We're sitting in Bangalore and actually closing $1 million plus deals. And finally, remember, when you do SaaS, you need to know the end user, either process or customer. And because of our IT services heritage, in particular in business processes, we actually have 3 million plus developers in the country, and we actually have all the process knowledge from our BPO or BPM operations, right? So combination of that makes this a tremendous opportunity for India. And maybe Manav, you may talk a little bit about sort of what we need to do to get there.
Yeah, so Shradha, $1 trillion opportunity, 500,000 job, great promise. But I think it is still a promise unless we do some steps over next 9 years, so to speak. And more important question that we get is, what is India's right to win? Why will India win? Valley, you have Estonia, you have Vietnam, and you have all those countries coming. So I think the biggest thing which Noshir alluded to is now movement of go to market from analog go-to-market to a digital go-to-market, where you can do majority of things sitting in wherever you are. You can be in Croatia, Bangalore, wherever. So we have the resource pool, and also beginning to get that initial seeds of knowledge where we can kickstart this entire revenue engine, so to speak, from India, which means all the things from targeting a customer to inside sales to even doing almost 80% of field sales work sitting in India, and then 20% of course can be in hybrid model. So I think digital GTM is kind of a ramban in which pandemic has provided us. It was not there before. Even at ECO also we hired 50, 60 people outside of India for go to market and field sales and pre-sales and so many other things. But now with digital go to market, the customer is very open to talk on a Zoom or a digital link. Maybe you do a handshake once in a quarter. Maybe a senior salesperson go and meet them in the geography that would still be required for enterprise class businesses. So that is point number one. So number one is that there is a shift to digital GTM. So therefore, India has a massive right to win in that. Number two, which I think is even more important than that, is this is not a winner takes all market. In a consumer internet, there can be only one Facebook, one Google, one Amazon, and they take $1 trillion market cap away from you, and then others are just die down or they have to sell out. But in this, Salesforce, just take an example, Salesforce being the leader and I say innovator in the entire cloud category, still has only 19.8% market share in the CRM. So that tells you that then you can still create far more number of billion-dollar companies in market cap and can continue to grow in revenue as you build your company correctly. So it's not a winner takes all market. So if we are able, and that's what we have done, and we'll walk you through it, where we have identified those subdomains or micro domains where Indian entrepreneurs can take their chance and can therefore build, great companies. And the third aspect of this is that the business is global in nature, which means it gives you, unless there's a global recession and global downturn is one part, but then there are pockets which will always be up. And that's what gives you the opportunity of entrepreneurs to continue to build their business in a very resilient fashion. I think these are the three main things which I think makes it such more attractive India right to win. And the last point, that what we need to do, I think the biggest limitation is going to be the talent. See, going from 40,000 people that we have in SaaS today to 500,000 jobs, it's going to be a tremendous amount of work. It's going to be very hard. It's already hard. As you know, the attrition rate has gone up after all the funding has come in. This all in the market today. And this will get even more crazier. Obviously, engineering will remain the biggest portion of that, but there are new jobs like product management, marketing, inside sales, SDR, support professional. And I was talking to a known Valley founder, I can take his name, but he said now you can even move your finance operations here, you can move entire marketing operations here. So they're also thinking like that. So there's going to be a massive wave of talent availability, or I would say the gap is going to come. So that's where the biggest work is going to happen from our side at SaaSBOOMi as well.
While pandemic has led to digitization, we've also seen job losses. So what are some of the things that you think, people watching and they want to be active in this space, they want to grow in this space, should be considering?
Yeah, so here is what we have thought of so far, and more work has to happen. First of all, we're going to work with all the agencies. We are working with NASSCOM, who is the forefront of skill development. We're also going to talk to the government that how do we get access to our education infrastructure? As you rightly said, it has to go to a grassroots level. So, so we're talking about doing SaaS-based curriculum in the colleges, especially MBA colleges or even engineering colleges, what technologies are engineering, and then inside sales and marketing operations. We have a huge infrastructure there in education, which we can get to. So that is, so skilling, and this is the main work that we're looking at, access to education infrastructure. And second is bringing a lot more awareness about the size of the opportunity. Because as you know, by the time it reaches to the grassroots, it takes a lot of time before, Infosys were a brand name in services, which really helped the cause. And, people don't get married if you don't work for Infosys. It used to happen before, right? So, so we'll have to build a narrative. And so, so what I mean to say is we have to build a narrative that why SaaS is such a big opportunity and how people can build long-term careers in this. So these are two main things which we're working on. Still early days. I think what will help us now is that we can do now, once we have access to education infrastructure and awareness is there, we can use a lot of digital technologies ourselves to train people actually. Like in olden days, we have to physically go to a college and then do it. But today we have enough base of professionals, I would say, who a few of them come forward and take the classes online. Okay, let me showcase my playbook of digital marketing, convert into a course curriculum, and wherever you are in Chennai, Shimoga, whichever city you are in, you can actually take that course, and also the teacher can be anywhere in the world for that matter, right?
And Shradha,
Yeah.
just to build on that, to the students and people listening out there, I mean, there are 3 or 4 critical skill sets that we're going to be short of in this country for the next 10 years, I think, and the world probably. And they all start with the word product, right? So think about product management, think
Yeah.
about product engineering, think about product design, and actually product operations. Of course, there are going to
Yeah.
be more. There's going to be the finance, there's going to be the marketing and sales, there's going to be growth, there's going to be a lot of other opportunities. But if you're a young person setting out in college today, these are some of the opportunities you should really think of, because they're going to be mainstays of job creation for some time.
You studied and looked at the data. Just want to get an understanding from you if you have any sense on where we are as of today in terms of the SaaS ecosystem in our country.
Sure. So the today, I mean, if you look at the pure play Indian SaaS ecosystem, it's about $2.6 billion is roughly the size, and as Manav said, it has employs about 40,000 people. We think that in revenue terms can go from 2.6 to about 50 to 70 billion by 2030. So in 10 years, it can grow about 20 times, roughly, right?
Wow.
And interestingly, at that point, even though that seems a very, very large number, 50 to 70 billion dollars, it was in 10 years was roughly the same aspiration we had even in the IT services world 25 years ago. But at that, in 2030, that 50 to 70 billion in SaaS revenues will be less than 6% of the global SaaS market, right? So we're still seeing that we are scratching the surface, even 10 years out, even with a 20x jump, we're scratching the surface of an opportunity that is going to be there for a long period of time.
When we look at SaaS and when we talk about SaaS, we talk about customers opportunities outside of India, and of course this is a global play. But at the same time, do you see the Indian market evolving, Indian enterprises adopting and leveraging SaaS players and SaaS startups, and what's the growth that you're seeing in the Indian market?
I think on the Indian market, see, SaaS is a secular trend. If you look at the overall growth of the SaaS market, SaaS is about 35% of overall software market, right? So which means 66% is still there. And that's what they say, SaaS is eating software now, right? Because everything will eventually should turn to SaaS. So Indian market does consume, local software from SAP, Oracle, Microsoft. So that is one piece. But also the lot of SMEs who are now actually getting automated. If you look at new age companies like Book and Dukan, where shopkeeper wants to build a web front, and there's entire race to actually get to a customer, so you can do a fintech play on that. So there's a kind of a merger of that whole fintech with the SaaS as well. So I think we will see the domestic market opportunity also opening up. But in the overall scheme of things, the growth rate of SaaS is predicted to be about 18% CAGR over next 9 to 10 years. So I think we will see a similar kind of growth rate in India also.
So when you think about SaaS, 3 big opportunities come to mind. There is the vertical SaaS. So let me go and support the Kirana store, as Manav was saying, right? That's a vertical SaaS play. There's also the horizontal SaaS play, as Eka has shown, right? In risk and trading and so on, right? Or supply chain, you can do a horizontal. There's a third, which is SaaS targeted towards the developer community. So these are products and applications that actually help developers do their job better, write better code, for example, right? We have a 4 million population in India. We have one of the largest developer populations in the world sitting in India, right? And that could also be as much an opportunity as any of the international opportunities as well.
Shradha, one point I would say, a lot of people ask us this question about India SaaS, India market. I think what we should look at is SaaS is actually more flatter than actually the services were. Whether I write a piece of an API which may use for your security and for your house, doesn't matter where it is coming from. I think that's what we're going to see it playing actually.
Tell us about the investment scene, because if we need to have very strong SaaS companies, well-funded companies, because they will be operating in a global playground, right? It's not going to be an Indian landscape only. what do you think is happening? How do you see that? And I'm asking you particularly because you have seen this uh, before it has become popular. You've been in this space, you've led this space, you've seen the challenges in this space. So what changes are you seeing? And just if you could allude to the fund that you've started, and how are you focusing on investing in the companies, in the early stage SaaS companies?
Yeah, so if you look at it, Girish and I have been working with the SaaS entrepreneurs in SaaSBOOMi for 6 years. We have been angel investment for about 7 years. And that's when we thought, now is the right time. Where should put where the money, where the mouth is, because SaaS opportunity is big and entrepreneurs need help from an operator, right? We have huge VC industry or become better and better over the years, which is good, which also needs some of operator help, which can come along with the funding. And we're seeing a very encouraging response. Just to give you, we just started the fund. We made 7 investments so far. I'm going to announce it next week. But if you look at Surge, Sequoia Surge, and we were talking to Mohit the other day, there are 40% of investment in Surge Bash is this time SaaS.
Yeah.
So SaaS is, I think we're seeing a lot of B2C entrepreneurs now, first time coming and saying, we want to do SaaS, tell us. In fact, one of the companies we founded, it's in stealth mode right now, is actually started by a second time founder in a B2C segment. We are seeing about 200 companies in the last 3 months.
So that means a lot of interesting companies are coming in the space, and you're saying that the capital is available now.
Yeah, more than you can ask for. I think capital is available. I think more than capital, Shradha, I think I'm glad that all the investors across the board have recognized that you have to invest more money in go-to-market right at the word go, at the time of seed itself. So actually the seed rounds have gone bigger. So previously, when I started, there was no capital, but even 10 years back, the seed was 250K, maybe 100K, maybe 500K. But now we're looking at seed rounds on an average of $1 million, and some seed rounds with really good teams are going to $3 million. Even in Indian ecosystem, which is very much almost getting aligned to where Valley is.
It's very promising. It's very large number we are talking about, and it's a huge opportunity, as we discussed, when it comes to job creation in our country. If you had to say two things that we have to safeguard, where the big numbers and the big promises can go helter-skelter and they don't deliver, two things, critical things that we should take care of, what would those two things be?
So Shradha, actually on the previous point also, I mean, if you look at the funding that's come into the country, it's about $4 billion into the Indian SaaS ecosystem in the last 5 years, right? So Manav's point is that actually, that bottleneck has actually gone away. Today, I think there is more money chasing fewer entrepreneurs than vice versa. If you give me two things, I would actually say number one and number two is the talent point, right? Because talent is going to be the rate limiting factor, just as it was, by the way, in services to the growth of this industry in India, right? By far, it's going to be one on two. If you say what's the distance third, I think there are a few things we need to do. There are things we absolutely have to do, but there are a few critical things we must do. One is what Manav referred to, which is there is a growth playbook that we need to understand and invest behind. Today, what we see is that the average Indian SaaS startup is fundamentally under investing in growth compared to its global peers or even the Indian leaders, right? And as a result, they are unable to take off or dominate a segment or a domain as we would have seen, right? So the market opportunity is not a problem. To Manav's point, we have looked at, there are almost 400 individual opportunities that we can identify, right? Each of which is sizable, right? That's more than, and probably we would have not identified, areas that players like Zenoti have gone in and created a unicorn in spas and salons. So by no means is the 400 even a definitive list, right? But the opportunity is not a problem. Funding is not a problem. The two critical problems are, number one, talent. Number two, one and two is talent. And a distant third is how we invest behind GTM, right? There are some things also that the government and as the industry association we need to do on ease of business in India and so on, which we've laid out. But by and large, it's the first and second.
I think one more thing which is really important, I'm going to be totally different dimension, which the report does not cover, but we have seen it happening in consumer internet when foreign MNCs come and raid our talent, right? So I think we'll be very careful of that dimension of talent also, because now for the first time, we're seeing a recognition by a US company also that yes, we should also go and build this entire digital GTM from India, which is good and bad news, right? So I think from an Indian entrepreneur perspective, when you're starting off, you're going to compete with talent in multiple dimensions now.
One thing to the government of India today, that we need to do this to get this number become actuality. What would you call out? What would you tell them?
I think for me, the two main, first of all, we want all Indian entrepreneurs to stay in India. Going out is very attractive, is full account convertibility, direct listing, and so things. So I think that is the number one priority. So we can keep our talent here and therefore can get more ideas. And number two is access to education infrastructure, which India has, which government plays a big part in skilling and reskilling of talent. And there, as you said, there we are aligned. They also want to create more jobs. And we are also here to create more jobs. We're seeing it. So these are the two main things.
Those are absolutely the two that we would focus on, which is ease of doing business, keeping, if we're going to create $1 trillion of market cap from the Indian SaaS ecosystem in the next 10 years, right? How do we build for India? That's critical. And second is, it's a little bit of this access. It's not even the funding for the skilling initiatives, because the funding, the curriculum, and all of that can actually come from the industry. But what the industry can't provide is the access and the infrastructure at the scale that's needed. So just as the government did many years ago with the Adopt the College initiatives, NASSCOMs, Future Skills, Prime Skills, etc., we need to build these product management, product design, and those kind of skill sets into those programs so that we can fuel the pipeline to the next generation of jobs.
You said you alluded to 400 opportunities that you have tapped, like, the opportunities in the SaaS landscape. To all the entrepreneurs watching and to whoever who wants to get into this space, what are some of the areas that you would say are interesting, untapped, and areas to go after?
If you look at the as Noshir said, there are vertical opportunities, horizontal, and then dev tool opportunities, right? So few areas. So digital health, every single disease management, disease automation is getting to cloud now, from your diabetes to muscular health to mental health. If you look at the amount of money flowing into that, that's the highest growing section right now among SaaS right now. Second, we are a hotbed of professional services, but believe it or not, very low automation, professional services automation itself. The services company themselves, as you know, don't automate themselves as much. And it is true world over, right? So another very big area. The third big area, which I think is the most potential, is actually the dev tool market. Because we have 3 million developers in India, you can actually test it, figure out what developers need, and look at what Microsoft is doing or Google is doing. They have the access to the more developers that India has today, right? GitHub and Postman was the example that came out in that. So I think that is where we're going to see a lot more opportunity, because that's very natural to us, right? We have developers, we have great resources, they can test it, it works, and the company is there. So I think these are the areas I will look at. And as Noshir was saying, Shradha, there are so many niche areas where you can create big companies. It's just unbelievable. You can't even sit in start thinking. Like now we are looking at CFO office area, right? So there are reconciliation, as simple as reconciling your stock, and data is a big opportunity there. So there are many such areas which are going to come across. So these are areas I would focus on. Old boring areas, or looking at all these new areas which are dev tools, digitization, and PSA.
Exactly right. And we've actually listed some of them, Shradha, in the report, and anyone can go to the SaaSBOOMi website and download it. I mean, just to add three more, right? I mean, the entire digital supply chain, right? Or if you think about digital commerce, what ChargeBee is doing, in that space, right? Manav talked about a few areas in just modernizing of all, business workflows, like, digital health is modernization of one workflow, right? But you have so many others. And the entire developer tool set, right? So I can say one thing for sure, we would have not captured all the opportunities by a mile, right? Even the ones we have, even the 400 lists that we put out, right? It would not capture all the opportunities that are out there, because there are going to be more opportunities. And remember, at the end of the day, we're only aspiring for 6% of the market.
Did anything come as a surprise when you were doing your study, when you were, creating this report? Was anything a surprise, or you thought that, okay, this was already a hunch and these numbers are anyways justifying it? Or tell us.
So maybe I'll start, and Manav, you should add. I was actually quite surprised, Shradha, because honestly, if you say that we can replicate what we've done in the last 30 years in IT services in the next 10 years from another industry and create roughly the same value, I would not have believed it before we did this research together and talked to people and actually really went into the numbers. So one of this is the scale of the opportunity. Everyone throws out, these very large numbers, but actually justifying the scale of an opportunity of this nature is a first for me, absolutely. The second is just the sheer excitement and the amazement at what people are doing and what they are able to deliver. I mean, if you listen to the Darwin Box or the ChargeBee or the Zenoti founders and you see what they have done, right? Honestly, it teaches most of us who've been professionals for years a thing or two about how to actually really, work for the next generation or aspire to do some things very differently. Those have been my two biggest learnings amongst others that I've gone through this process.
I think, Shradha, obviously we are more grassroots players and we are operators. We see this happening every day, and I think for us the biggest surprise, the pace it picked up since last 12 months. We would not have thought, and Shradha, we know we have met multiple times. I've been speaking about Podded for last 5 years, but what we have witnessing in the last 12 months has been just amazing, nothing short of amazing. And second, I think it is very exciting to see vision turning into reality. When we started SaaSBOOmi 5-6 years, it was nothing, right? We were people that a bunch of people trying to do some playbooks, and it'll like a college project, it'll die down, right? So seeing that convert into a reality is a big thing. And a lot of benefit that we're seeing today is actually the hard work of 5-6 years, where we put in a lot of. Remember in 2015, we were struggling to create good products. If you look at the narrative back then the issue was, can you create a world-class product which can, cater to multinationals and globe, right? So we have solved that problem. We've been able to get the community to talk very openly, talk their failures, talk their vulnerabilities. I think that's the second big thing that we've got. And therefore, we are in a position now where we can take benefit of the wave that we're seeing in SaaS as well. And I must add in the end that this report is not the report by just SaaSBOOmi and McKinsey. Actually, I'm really glad that the entire industry has come together. There are more than 50 entrepreneurs who participated. All the investors, or most of the investors, participated in this, thanks to NASCOM, Segoa, Excel, Lightspeed, 8Roads, and many such investors, Bloom. They've all been part of making this.
My last two questions, and I can't end without talking about the IPO that we have seen, the IPO rush that is happening. And it's a great time right now because there was such a buzz around Zomato's IPO and a good, it got oversubscribed, and this year so many companies are coming. What do you have to say when it comes to SaaS companies? When are we going to see interesting listings in this space?
I think we already saw PubMatic, right? Which was a kind of spin-off and not a huge IPO, but still an IPO. PubMatic went IPO. I think I can't speak. So we were seeing few more of the IPOs coming in waiting in line. We'll see Freshworks go to an IPO soon. I think in SaaS, the biggest metric is the revenue metrics. I think the way I would look at it is that the moment you touch $100 million in revenue, it's a real cash like services business would have been. And then you decide whether you want to go on IPO, you want to stay private. But I think either which way will create a lot of value.
But Noshir, I wanted to ask you, have you seen, companies in US and different geographies, or maybe China for that matter, have you seen enough SaaS companies getting listed? Because what Manav said, generally, typically as a SaaS business, you would be cash rich, you would be EBITDA positive, and you might not need to raise as much capital from retail investors.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Shradha, which is that the B2B SaaS, as Manav said earlier on, relative to B2C SaaS, is actually a more profitable and a more predictable business model, right? And you are not burning as much money upfront as you traditionally would do in a B2C on customer acquisition. So you're absolutely right. The model is more profitable. It is, in our opinion, equally scalable, right? Of course, with different aspects to scale. But we're seeing enormous interest from both public and private markets in SaaS players, right? In fact, as Manav said, Surge's portfolio is 40% SaaS. I mean, if I look even abroad, even if you take a relatively, you would say, old world industry like construction, right? If you look at the money that's poured into construction SaaS softwares in the last 3 years, it's incredible, right? And you wouldn't
Yeah.
associate construction like banking as at the forefront of AI and digital tech and so on. So funding to me is not going to be a problem. In fact, there's going to be more money chasing the good entrepreneurs and the good teams with the good products and so on. Right? I think what's going to be really the challenge, as Manav said, is coming in and protecting that team from the onslaught of just enormous opportunity. Right? And that can be from MNCs setting up centers in India, right, which they are doing in spades. New Silicon Valley startups, which will actually start off with a setup in India, and obviously the Indian entrepreneurs who come out and look at problems and solve it. So that's going to be the bigger challenge. Funding, to me, I think you're going to see a spate of value creation in this industry in the next decade.
I think what would help, if thinking from Indian entrepreneur, if Indian SaaS companies can list in India. That also gives
Oh,
them,
yeah.
like what did Indian services, right? Infosys listed here, it was undersubscribed, all the story. So I think there are SaaS companies in India, probably you can list at $50 million. So you don't have to wait for $100 million to list. And then you have a larger access pool of capital and nobody controls you as well, right? So there are those issues, I think, which also help. If Indian SaaS companies can also get access to Indian capital markets.
Two things, I wouldn't use the word headline, but two key points, two key takeaways after this exercise. What would that be?
I think it is talent, talent, and talent. I think every day we're discussing that. I think how do we get access to talent or build talent? And second, on the other hand, is a sheer scale of opportunity, $1 trillion market cap, 500,000 jobs. I think these are the two main dimensions that we are thinking on right now.
Yeah.
And if I were to start with a viewer or a broad sort of reader example of that, I would say to the entrepreneurs out there, it's a great time. It's honestly a great time, right? To build for India, with India, for the future of India. And honestly, you can build in India for global today, right? And that's a very, very unique advantage that we have. Let's use it. And second is we have momentum, right? And one of my famous mentors in the firm always used to say, if you have momentum, use it or lose it, right? If you have momentum, build on it, right? And go out and be aggressive to aspire to capture the world because we really think we can do it.
Yeah, the famous line you
Yeah.
should say is Rise of Global SaaS from India. I think that's what it is. That really sums it up.
Thanks a lot. And hopefully we will see a lot more entrepreneurs here in India and $1 trillion. And we look back to your report in 2030 and hopefully earlier and say that you guys came up with this report in 2021, July. Thank you. Thanks so much.